When the sun finally sets on the Hall of Fame career of Chris Jericho, he'll surely go down as one of the greatest of all time. It's been said that the key to longevity in any art form is the ability to change with the times, and Jericho has proved himself more than capable of this. Starting out in 1990 with his debut coming in Extreme Championship Wrestling in 1995, he quickly moved on to World Championship Wrestling before finally ending up in the World Wrestling Federation, where Y2J has been ever since and single-handedly proved that a leopard absolutely can change its spots. I'm Ben from What Culture, and here are the many faces of Chris Jericho ranked from worst to best. Number 10. Cool Dad Chris Jericho. Over the last decade, Chris Jericho has left and returned to the WWE on a number of occasions. Initially, his returns were greeted with energy and joy, but over time, this began to dissipate. The Chris Jericho who initially returned at the beginning of 2016 was the worst version of Chris Jericho. For lifelong Jerichoholics, it was difficult to watch, as it seemed that he was more interested in catchphrases and outfits than any interesting character work. Now, if Jericho was portraying a heel, this would all be acceptable under an obnoxious umbrella, but as a babyface, it left fans a little conflicted as to why they should cheer him. Number 9. The Codebreaker. The end of 2007 saw Y2J make his first big return to WWE after months of cryptic 15-second binary code videos hinting at his return. The videos were extremely well done, and needless to say, everyone was mojo rawly for his return. God, he's bad. Jericho reappeared on the November 19th edition of Raw in 2007, interrupting Randy Orton and vowing to save the WWE Universe before being immediately placed into a World Championship feud. Something didn't click though, and within a couple of months, opinion on Jericho's return had soured. He was then shifted into a feud with JBL, and despite winning his 8th Intercontinental Championship, it wasn't until he became involved in the feud between Batista and Shawn Michaels that things finally fell into place. Number 8. Lionheart. Unless you want to go all the way back to Cowboy Chris Jericho, Lionheart represents the first true wrestling identity that he had. It brought him huge amounts of success in Mexico and in CMLL in particular, where Lionheart had an 11-month reign as NWA World Middleweight Champion. It was as Lionheart that Jericho made his first real impression on professional wrestling in North America, quickly establishing himself as a top competitor in ECW, where after just 1 year he left for WCW. In WCW, Jericho as Lionheart was as vanilla a babyface as one can imagine, and it was this bland character that initially caused him frustration within the company. Luckily for Jericho though, a heel turn did eventually come. Number 7. Undisputed Champion of the world. After stumbling a little upon arriving in the WWF, it took the invasion angle for Chris Jericho to really establish himself in the company. It was at this time that he renewed his rivalry with The Rock, and the 2 years that had passed since their first famous meeting had allowed the audience to slowly take Jericho seriously. It could be argued that Jericho was one of the few beneficiaries of the invasion story, as it was he who unified the WWF and WCW heavyweight championships on one fateful night in December. Number 6. List Stupid Idiot Jericho. Jericho's most recent run was an utter delight and perfect for the veteran performer. He can still wrestle to a high level in the ring, but frequent attempts to push him as a babyface finally saw him return as a heel. Beginning with calling people stupid idiots, Y2J went into catchphrase overload mode, sporting an expensive scarf and affecting a camp cocky swagger, and it was great. Also, he had weird facial hair. Then came the list. Anyone who annoyed Jericho went on the list, and it was great. Soon, he became best friends with Kevin Owens, which was also just so great. Really great stuff. Number 5. The Ayatollah of Rock and Rolla. Throughout the majority of his top-level career, Jericho has never been one to shy away from his extracurricular all-right rock band Fozzy, and suitably, rock and roll has played its part in his various personas. Jericho turned heel in the summer of 2005 and started feuding with the newly crowned WWE champion John Cena, and Jericho the rock star became intertwined with Jericho the wrestler. The two became one on an episode of Raw that year as Jericho and Cena took on one another in what was billed as a battle of the bands. The full-on rockstar version of Jericho in WWE didn't get much of a chance to flourish, as the program with Cena was his last before a hiatus from the company. Number 4. The world's most jealous man. Jericho began teaming with his fellow Canadian Christian towards the end of 2002, and the recurring theme in his character throughout this time was jealousy. His feud with Shawn Michaels was so good because Jericho idolized Michaels, but the jealousy was clear to see. The beef with subsequent feudee Goldberg had real-life connotations, but in canon, it was about Jericho's jealousy towards Goldberg's WCW success. The character worked so well because Chris Jericho has always been one of the best at playing the entitled bad guy, but the run came to an end with a face turn involving Christian and Trish Stratus that culminated with the duo betraying him at WrestleMania 20. Number 3. Y2J. For the overwhelming majority of his first tenure in the WWF, Chris Jericho was known as Y2J, a play on the Y2K bug that many feared would destroy technology going into the new millennium. It didn't, it was never going to. Jericho made his debut by interrupting The Rock of all people, and his louder-than-life rock star-esque persona would stay with him throughout his first run. Whether as a heel or a face, the traits were the same. The ridiculous hair, loud outfits, creative insults, and brash attitude all remained, whether on the side of good or bad. When Jericho took a break from professional wrestling in 2005, there was little chance of him returning as Y2J. For many fans, that character is Chris Jericho. Number 2. Conspiracy theory victim. Lionheart just wasn't really clicking in WCW, so Jericho turned heel in 1997, taking masks and other trophies from his fallen victims. His most notable feud during this time was with Dean Malenko, who would defeat Jericho for the Cruiserweight Championship, setting him off on one of the greatest character amendments in WCW history. Jericho claimed conspiracy and went on to blame anyone and everyone for the loss. J.J. Dillon, Ted Turner, the US government, and more were blamed. Nobody was safe. Of course, this was all wrapped up in the classic delusional heel persona, but Jericho played it to such a T that it felt fresh and invigorating once more. Number 1. The best in the world at what he does. As well as being the finest character of Chris Jericho's career, this incarnation of Jericho may very well stand as one of the greatest professional wrestling characters of all time. After the Codebreaker return left a little to be desired, Jericho transitioned into an all-time great feud with Shawn Michaels that saw him shed whatever was left of the Y2J skin and become something entirely different. The loud outfits were replaced by suits, the brash talking by a more deliberate, quiet tone. The gimmick was inspired by Javier Bardem's character in No Country for Old Men, and you'd be hard-pushed to find a character lifted from cinema that was better suited to pro wrestling. Jericho was a self-righteous, honest man and would quietly tell opponents that he was the best in the world at what I do, and for the tenure of this character, it was very difficult to disagree with him.